Doris, you darling bus, episode number 11. G'day folks and welcome to another episode of Doris, you darling bus, a fortnightly podcast about that unsung hero of the music industry, the tour bus. I'm your host, my name is John O'Zilber, and today's guest is not just any old Aussie blues singer. She was in fact the first Aussie blues singer to win the International Blues Challenge in Memphis, Tennessee, and she spent the last 20 odd years touring all around Australia and the US and picked up a swag of awards along the way. I am of course talking about Fiona Boyes, and she stopped in to pay me a visit and have a yarn on her way up north. Fiona Boyes, thank you so much for taking the time to chat about tour buses.
It's a delight. Thank you so much for having me.
So you were a relatively late comer to playing guitar and to play music professionally. What I want to know is, what is your earliest memory of becoming aware of a world where you could drive around the country and play music?
Oh, look, I think it was even more like, could there be a world where you would get up on stage in front of people? Mm-hmm. I think this is something that a lot of musicians and performers forget, that there was once a time where there was an invisible curtain, and the idea of walking through that and actually being the one on stage, it's like a lot of people are still, scared of public speaking and things like that. It's I would never have imagined even being a performer. I wouldn't have. Looking back, it's still astonishing to me that I made that leap. It was like I had my midlife crisis early.
Yeah.
And but yeah, then the idea of touring. Now, touring, having made the jump to being a performer, the idea of touring was pretty much alien, because the thing was, coming up in Melbourne, where there was a lot of gigs, you didn't tour. Everyone just got 3 residencies a week, and just kind of there was blues gigs most nights, or a lot of nights of the week. And although I started off playing solo acoustic fingerpicking blues in coffee shops, that was really where I got my start. But I'd only been playing out for like a year, 18 months. I was very fledgling when I had the opportunity to join the Mojos, my first band. And then as that band sort of got started, even though we didn't start off as some sort of political statement to be all female, it wasn't all female band. The downside of that is within a year or 18 months of having the band together, we had our first maternity leave and baby. And so, it was not like a lot of the guys around town where you just chuck everyone in the tour bus and get on the road, because, I think we were quite keenly aware of, we ended out, some of the girls had babies, and we had to, a lot of more stuff had to be taken into consideration about keeping the home fires burning. And so we pretty much didn't tour. We occasionally we'd go and do something like Byron Bay, or we'd go and do Bridgetown. Yeah. And then, believe me, there's nothing like a mother on the tear when you suddenly, because the girls would suddenly be, the mothers amongst us would be like, yahoo, party time.
Yeah.
And we might do a couple of gigs around that anchor date. Yeah. But we really didn't. It was
sort
tour.
of like a quick trip and back.
Because and I don't even think I didn't really think about it, because there was so many gigs around Melbourne.
Okay. I mean, Jimmy Hocking and Jeff Atchison both said similar sorts of things, that, like first tours were sort of like you'd go to Sydney for a weekend and do a few shows.
Yeah, you just do a few shows and then you scurry back to Melbourne, the centre of the universe.
Yeah. So for you then, I presume then, is it fair to say that you didn't really tour until you were, you'd already had quite a career playing music before?
I guess I'd had the opportunity to learn my craft to a point with the Mojos, and as I said, starting off with acoustic country blues fingerpicking and then moving to electric. When I had the opportunity to join the Mojos, I thought I'd look like an idiot playing acoustic with a band. Even though I had no concept of playing electric, I thought better borrow one of those. And so I think probably the Mojos were together for an incredibly long time, you know, looking back on it. Knowing what I know now about trying to put a band together, it was quite amazing. We stayed together for so long, and we achieved quite a lot in that time. But there came a point where I decided to make a solo album, and my first 2 solo albums under my own name, which featured special guests, which were all from the Mojos. But it was like a mental shift too.
Yeah.
And that was just at the time that I met the preacher, my husband, and with his encouragement, you know, he really pushed me into going into the Melbourne playoffs for the International Blues Challenge.
Yes.
Because one of the ways I'd coped with being the lone female guitar player in the blues scene in Melbourne, you know, because there weren't any role models really, was to just be really diligent about never putting myself in a position of competition and making it more stressful than it kind of potentially already could be, you know.
Okay.
So the idea of going into a playoff and being, you know, you were used to people judging you as a female player.
Sure, yeah.
So the idea of going and having people judge you on purpose, or, you know, in that sense, was really confronting to me. But he was really
sort of giving someone permission to judge you.
Yeah, exactly. You already do it now. You know, you can do it for real. But I think that Steve's encouragement, and then the experience of going to America for the first time, and winning the IBC and everything that came out of that was really the beginning of me as a road dog, or you know, the beginning of the touring.
Okay, cool. Well, you've preempted my next question, which was going to be, you know, you won the International Blues Challenge in Memphis in 2003.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I was going to ask you how that changed your touring, but obviously that's sort of what launched you into the idea of, you know, the full-time touring. And
in the first instance, it actually meant the first really full-on touring I did was in America rather than in Australia.
Yeah.
Because the thing was that I went to the International Blues Challenge in Memphis without any real expectations. I was thrilled to be there because I'd never even been to the States before.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd always wanted to go, and you know, everyone wants to have a pilgrimage to the home of the blues, but of course by that stage I was a musician, so I was broke.
Yeah.
So to have the opportunity to go there and then to win, and being the first woman and the first non-American to do that, you know, I think everybody was as surprised as I was.
Yeah.
But it was so really very exciting and magical.
Yeah.
It was for me just being there and playing, being part of it, because it was everything was very new and it was a whole new experience. And you know, I was playing my songs about my original songs, like I had one about Memphis Minnie.
Yeah.
She could play that thing, and remember thinking, and here I am playing on Beale Street, on the street where she would have played back in the day, where all my heroes would have played on that street. How cool's that?
That's it. And potentially people who may have even seen them play.
Yeah. So there was that aspect. And the preacher said, well, look, this is great that you've won. That's cool. But you know what? It's like Miss America, you know. This time next year, somebody else wins. So there was a couple of guaranteed performances that came with the win.
Yeah.
And the first one of those was the opportunity to perform at the WC Handy Awards, as the Blues Music Awards were known in those days.
Yeah.
That was so, you know, if we were talking late January, early February, we need to be back in America by May, and we can be in America for, you know, 3 months or something without getting hassled. So let's just put together a tour.
Wow.
And the preacher got onto it and did this incredible job of, from a standing start, and not really having many contacts. He just called people from Australia, and with some, you know, stunning results, and ended out. We did this 3 month sort of extended tour in the States.
Ah, There we go. Okay, well, we're going to come back to the preacher because he's a subject within himself. But let's talk about that first tour of America then, because generally what I find myself asking in this podcast is, well, you toured in Australia and then you went to America. How is touring different in America to Australia? But if your first tour was in America, was it what you expected it was going to be?
Well, I had no template for touring. So, and, really at that point, we were lucky enough there was a few key dates that came, and obviously winning the IBC, cracked open the door. So I had the chance to play at the Blues Music Awards and make contact with people from different blues societies, and I also, through people like Jeff Atchison, who'd already been over there and broken some ground, had friends in Atlanta. So, you go to places where people, friends and friends of friends can help. So I ended up spending time in Atlanta and played some gigs there, made friends there, including people like Suzanne Holmes, who is still a great help and a great friend and a mentor.
Cool.
To this day. I've just played a gig for her community. She's since moved to Florida, but she had a little club called Blue Note West. And one of the things we had a dream of is at the end of the 3 months that we would do a live recording and release an album that came out of that touring experience.
Yeah.
So that was the Live in Atlanta album, which was recorded at Blue Note West, which was Suzanne's little club that she had on the outskirts of Atlanta. And it was actually, she ran a bowling centre and she had a little club. She's such a great supporter of the blues. She had a little club that was attached to the bowling centre, and we ended out playing a gig there. And
we're talking like 10-pin bowling.
Yeah,
okay.
That was a 10-pin bowling place, but she had a bar attached to it, and she would have gigs.
That's super cool.
It was super cool. And over the course of the touring, I'd met people like Bob Margolin, Kaz Kazanoff, who went on to produce my albums that were recorded in Austin. And I just had, people said, how did you get people like this to play with you? I guess we were just these Aussies just going around making friends. And so I called Bob Margolin and Kaz Kazanoff lived in Austin and said, look, if we got you an airfare, would you come into Atlanta and play a self-promoted gig on a Monday night on the outskirts of town at a 10-pin bowling joint? We're going to do a gig. There won't be any rehearsal. We're just going to play. We're going to record it. The local Blues Society recorded it on ADAT tapes. I still have them. And we're going to make an album. And
nothing ventured, nothing gained. I mean,
I'm going to make an album. And I remember that was before I knew Kaz Kazanoff as a great musician.
Yeah.
I'd met him as a player, but I didn't realise at that point that he was also the arranger for the Texas Horns, and that he had this incredible track record as a producer for Antones, and he was producer for a lot of the classic blacktop stuff in New Orleans. So he was a producer, and I remember we're sitting down before the gig, and I said, we're going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and then I'll get you up, and I know you're a saxophone player, but I know you play great harmonica, so play harmonica on that, and then I'll call you up. And he went, you know what you're trying to do is crazy, don't you?
Yeah.
And I went, yeah, but we're just going to do it.
It's just crazy enough to work.
And it did, it was a wonderful experience, and these people have ended out, being lifetime friends out of those experiences.
That's amazing. So that's your first tour?
That was the first tour, really.
That's incredible.
It was the first extended tour, because other than that it would have been just quick tours, literally go to a festival and maybe stay an extra weekend and do a few gigs.
Yeah.
Maybe in Western Australia or something with the Mojos. But yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but that would be right.
Yeah. So when you came back to Australia then, did you keep that momentum going?
Well, not really, because of course, with the preacher and married life, there's also some family responsibilities which were then, kind of new on the horizon that we were all kind of dealing with. So, and at that point, I think of my touring, and particularly my touring vehicles, very much as kind of a post-preacher phenomenon.
Right.
Before that, for a very, very long time, I had a trusty Toyota LiteAce. And that got me, because the gigs that you would do would be regional gigs like Ballarat, and I had for a very long time, I did a gig, a midweek jam at Tooradin. I mean, these would be gigs that would be a couple of hours out of town, and this little LiteAce band, people laughed, and it was looking really, really trashy by the end of it.
Yeah.
But I'd take it had nothing in the back, put a chipboard down so it was easy just to shove gear in and out. And that really was got me and the Mojos and PAs and all the gear and around for a long time. By the time I was living in the inner city in Melbourne, and talking about potential bad neighbours, I'd moved incrementally out of the inner city hotbed of blues like Collingwood, Carlton, Fitzroy, Richmond. I was living in Preston, and down far into the street was kind of a bit of a dodgy neighbourhood. Anyway, the car, the LiteAce van got stolen at one point, and it did look pretty trashy at that point. It had that classic kind of rust out of the back tailgate and everything. Look, the interior door handles had fallen off, and there was actually, coat hanger wire.
Yeah, the wire thing.
It was looking a bit paddock bomb.
I had that in my Magna.
Yeah, it's the Mr. Spotless handles on the wire handles on the inside, screwed in with bits of. Anyway, it looked like nothing on earth. But anyway, it was stolen, and of course I was devastated and lucky then that I could get to gigs because the preacher had a car. Anyway, about a week later, get a knock on the front door from a nice young policewoman who said, "Well, hello, we've." Because I reported it stolen. We've located your vehicle. Actually, it's been. I said, "That's fantastic. Where is it?" And whoever's stolen it had brought it back. Just within a few doors of my house. It was just down the road, and I went out, and I had to laugh because the car was in pretty bad nick. Obviously, some of these dodgy young guns down the street had thought it was probably perfect for shifting a lot of stolen goods or something, because it was a big space and easy to break into. Filed off icy pole sticker, get into that vehicle. But when I looked at it when it was returned, it was in so much better nick than when it was stolen. They'd obviously decided that it looked so bad that maybe they'd get pulled over.
That'd be too obvious.
And, be checked for roadworthy or something. So actually the bit of they'd washed it. A few things had been sort of beaten out, and the back tailgate, which had all the rust, they'd got some, a can of spray paint, and they'd tidied it all up. It was in better nick. It was in better nick than when it was stolen.
That's incredible. How very thoughtful of them, I guess.
Very thoughtful, yeah. Unfortunately, they did steal the next proper tour vehicle as well.
Oh.
That's another story.
And we'll be right back to our chat with Fiona Boyes in just a second. But first, Fiona, where can we find you on the internet and in real life?
Okay, best place to find me in real life is to check www.fionaboyes.com tour dates. And you can find me all over social media, a Facebook personal profile, Fiona Boyes official music page on Facebook, Instagram, and even occasionally on Twitter. The next tour vehicle was when I started going out with the preacher. We started doing some tours out and, stretching beyond Victoria out into sort of regional New South Wales and some other places. And we were driving his car, which was, now what model? XF, Falcon station wagon, the red banger we called that.
Right.
It sort of started off okay, but then there was a moment where I actually, the day before we were supposed to go out on the road somewhere, I was dropping my dog over at my mother's house for her to be minded while I was away. And I, in a moment of inattention, and some roadworks and someone suddenly stopping in front of me, I ran up the back of someone and squashed in the front of the red banger. And anyway, we took it to a couple of, we had to get on the road, within sort of 24, 48 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like, the car's like it's the radiator's pushed in. We took it to a couple of people who were reputable.
Right.
And we took it to even a friend who was a mechanic, and everyone clucked and tutted and shook their head. And then we had this brilliant idea because there was a guy around the corner from where we lived in Preston. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure we ever knew his name, but we used to call him Mr. Shonky. And Mr. Shonky, well, we just we're extrapolating here, but he had like a little workshop on a corner on a main street. You don't need to know where. Yeah. I don't know if Mr. Shonky's still in business. Anyway, but Mr. Shonky would have, you come home from gigs at all hours and he'd have vehicles in there and coming and going and things being, you could see welding and bashing and stuff happening at all hours.
Yeah.
And we went, let's just go down and see if this guy around the corner can help. Mm-hmm. So we got the car in there and he looked at all the bits that were sort of stovey and he went, no worries. And he got a big chunk of wood and he kind of it was complete bush mechanics, and he kind of pulled out the front so it was sort of working, and he kind of wired the number plate on with a bit of wire, and the front grille just got pulled out and thrown away. So the overall effect was kind of Mad Max. Yeah. But we're on the road.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
And the red banger was off.
We'll pay cash.
I think we're on our way to Gympie or somewhere where it probably looked quite in place.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the preacher. You married Steve Clark in, about 2002 or something like that? 2001?
Yeah, 2002. Yeah.
2002. Now, the preacher is very well known in the Australian blues scene, and he defies words, I think. I think people who know him will sort of understand, but I guess to describe him would be a keen intellect and a very compassionate man. What does it mean for you to have him on the road with you? Because he does come along on a lot of your tours.
Yes, he does. And there's been times where he's had, other duties or other jobs and hasn't been able to. And it works much better when we can work as a team, because he's a very interesting, complicated, fabulous person, but he can make things happen, and actually he tends to be the wheelman. He tends to be the driver. Yeah. And more, the last little bit where I've been doing a lot more regional touring commitments here in Australia. He's also been doing the sound and doing the PA, and back in the day I used to do a lot of that stuff myself. And man, you're gonna drive and do all that stuff and play solo gigs. It's really tough. So Steve's input's invaluable. Yeah. And also his booking, talents. And there's been some, I don't know how much I want to talk out of school, but he's had some fabulous modes. Actually, I'll tell you I don't know whether you leave it in or not, but
I'm definitely going to leave it in now.
That first tour I was talking about, that first tour in America, he rang up. Okay, I'll leave out names then, but there was a particular club in a particular city, and he went, okay, well, just looking up. We're going through that town, that city. We'll look up blues clubs. There's one, and he rang up and went, "G'day, I'm ringing from Australia. I'm representing an Australian woman who plays blues and guitar and looking for a gig." Mm-hmm. And this guy went on to say how many respected blues people, particularly blues women, that he had never hired at his club and would never hire. Yeah. And it was all about, I wouldn't hire any. And then he said at the end, I don't have much truck with girly guitar players.
Right.
And Steve went, oh, why? Have you got a small cock? Apparently this is not how most Americans do their negotiating. And the guy just went, pardon me? And Steve went, well, have you got a small cock or what, mate? Are you scared of women? Why don't you hire them?
Yeah.
And the guy was so flabbergasted, and he was a known person in the industry. The guy was so flabbergasted, he actually said, all right, I'll give her a gig.
What are you doing the Friday the 12th?
Yeah, and so I got a gig, and then it was funny because he actually came down to the club and sat in the front row with his arms folded. What do you got, girlie? But, the thing was, Steve got me the gig. It was not the most conventional way of approaching a club owner, and probably, not how he would normally do things. But, horses for courses. And he just had a moment, he just went, yeah. And, people find it strange because he is an ordained Anglican priest.
Yeah.
So the other scale of that is people will go, I don't know if I should swear because I've heard that you're married to a priest. And it's like, believe me, there's nothing you can say to this man that he hasn't second-guessed you on already.
Yeah.
I say to people, he's not so much like cucumber sandwiches in the manse. He's more like a preacher in a Clint Eastwood movie.
Yeah.
He's as comfortable, talking to a bishop as he is to a biker.
I guess that's his charm and probably why he's so good at what he does for you with booking tours and
and
promo
sure.
and getting out there and just
you're cut
being
to the
preacher.
Well, and the other thing is, I have written songs about some of the issues that have come up with either religion, spirituality, and often taking a light-hearted approach to them. But the funny thing is that often I feel like if we're at a gig, sometimes I'm working one end of the room and he's working the other because, funnily enough, people often will go and talk to him at the bar or in the green room about stuff, maybe quite personal things or family things, religion, spirituality, things that they have had locked up that they haven't felt very comfortable talking to someone about.
Yeah.
And I think that's his gift, that sort of touch of being approachable in those spaces. And often some really interesting things come out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even I've had quite deep and meaningful chats with Steve, even, just minutes after saying g'day.
Yes. About, ethics or, sometimes people go, I'm not, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I'm sort of
He's very disarming like that.
I'm struggling with an issue about this,
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to have travelling with you.
Yeah.
Maybe it makes the whole experience as well.
Well, I think, it's always, it's pretty intense, whoever you're travelling with, where you're, cramped up in a vehicle or, with that day in, day out, and it becomes really telling too when you're with a band. And the exception to the rule is when I've been in Europe where Steve hasn't been on tour with me in Europe. But, you have to be with people like the guys I've toured with in Europe have been great because you have to be able to get along because there will be coming a time and coming soon that the rigours of the road and you're going to end out having times where you've got a crazy schedule and you're not getting enough sleep or you have to go over and above to make the gig. And, people get raggedy and they get tired and so the gift of being able to give each other space and get along and maintain a cheerful aspect and that the gig must go on is vital. Otherwise you get that whole scenario of the band that is doing really well and they go out on tour for the first time and promptly come home and break up.
Yeah.
Because, it's you've in some ways for a hardened tour person, you're almost better to get, not necessarily the most genius player, but actually you need the package of someone who is a great player, is, can rub along with everybody, can, maintain their sensibilities in the face of goodness knows what's about to happen next.
Yeah. And speaking to that, do you have a preference for touring by yourself or with other people? Do you enjoy the company of other people that, bouncing off each other and...
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've probably done more touring in the last, 10 years, and a lot of that has been just me and Steve. I tend to have more of a situation of either someone new on the road that we're bringing out from America that we're touring for some weeks, or, my long-term band members who are fantastic. That's more like fly them into a major festival or somewhere. The economics of touring these days is that it's often both here and overseas it's more economic to be nimble and go by yourself and have, I have rhythm section in Europe, and I have, one on the East Coast of America and one on the West Coast, and, you hook up with players that way. So that's been more of a probably, although I enjoy it, it's less common.
Right, okay. It's and a fair bit of work, even though, economically that might be the only way that it's feasible to tour, in inverted commas, with a band. But
yeah, but the thing is, once you actually have more people in the one space, there's also a herding cats factor.
Yeah.
Because, I've seen guys that do this all the time, and they sometimes have they have a real strategy and a way of doing it. But because, if you stop somewhere, okay, and you're on a schedule, it's like I'm trained. It's like Pavlov's dogs. Yeah. Like as soon as if you're stopping for gas, then you get out, you buy a drink, you go to the toilet. You don't, it's not like you wait for someone to finish filling up the petrol tank and then go, oh, by the way, I need to go and get a coffee or something. Yeah. It's like do all your stuff and be ready to go when by the time to be efficient. Now, that's okay when there's just 2 or 3 of you.
Or when it's you and your husband, you sort of,
there's okay, we all know the unspoken rule.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's like, if you get 8 people and people who aren't used to that, then everyone's, someone's over there on their cell phone, somebody else is over there smoking, somebody's suddenly decided, oh, that's right, I should have grabbed something. And so a 5-minute stop becomes a 25-minute stop and everything.
Yeah, I can't handle that. That's why I can never tour with a band.
Everybody, sometimes it's great. I've had fantastic experiences with the guys I've toured with in Europe, because I've mostly been based in the north of Italy with my Italian drummer, Pablo Leone, who's wonderful. And it's great. It's just like we'll get somewhere and you go, okay, well, we've got, 2 hours until we need to do something, so we can choose to do something together, or everyone can go and do their own thing or whatever, and we'll be back.
Yeah.
But you just have to establish some rules. You have to establish some rules,
It's interesting, you were saying earlier today that you were listening to Fitzy and Kara's episode of the podcast, and Kara talking about touring in Japan with a bunch of Irish and Scottish people. She said that the Japanese, they're so on time and so punctual. And, if you were late, that was it, you're off the tour. And then her working with, Irishmen and Scotsmen who are not so punctual, that they were so scared of being kicked off the tour that they ended up sleeping in the lobby in the hotel. It's interesting, I think, how different cultures perceive that importance of time.
Oh, yes, see, that reminds me of, and I can't remember, I think it was probably Switzerland, it would have to be Switzerland, where they sort of said, we turned up and did a sound check and said, well, when would you like us to start and how long would you like the sets to be and, how long would the break? We'd like to start at approximately 11:43. It was something like that, whatever. I can't remember the date, but it was actually the approximate was ran completely counterintuitive to the distinct time that was obviously.
Fee, we're going to jump into the lightning round.
Yes, I didn't even get to the white whale after the red banger, but that.
Stop the clock. Let's go back. Tell us about the white whale.
The white whale was a transit van that we bought in Canberra. Mm-hmm. You can always chop that out if you want.
That will be chopped out.
That will be chopped out. But between you and me, we bought this off someone because it seemed like a good idea at the time, and because we knew that shortly afterwards we would need to get to Woodford to play Woodford Folk Festival back in the days where everybody camped in Blues Valley.
Right.
And we knew we were not going to be camped. We didn't want to camp. So what we did was we got this transit van, and we called it the White Whale because it handled like a whale. It kind of wallowed about. But what the preacher discovered was that we had an old queen-size futon base, and he got some those metallic veranda posts.
Yeah.
Screwed them into the floor pan, took out all the interior of the back, screwed these stump holders in, veranda post holders into the back, and you could assemble a queen-size futon inside the van. It neatly took up the whole space. So then you had in the back, you had underneath, you could put all the amps and guitars. Yeah. If you're going to camp at somewhere like Woodford Folk Festival, preacher style, you need to have a kitchen. You need to have tarps. You need to have 2 or 3 cases of wine. You need to have all this good stuff. All that good stuff would go underneath the bed base. You unroll the futon, you can sleep on top of that, and you can fit everything in. And so we drove it up to Woodford, put a tarp up over the whole thing, and it was just like, so that was our tour vehicle for many
Mahal
years.
On wheels.
It was the Taj Mahal on wheels. And I tell you what, when it was pouring rain and he had the whole camping thing and the kitchen and the cooking and the wine, and it's like moths to a flame.
Yeah.
Every musician would be.
Yeah. Oh, I know I'd be there.
Yes, we had a lot of adventures in the White Whale.
What happened to the white whale?
The White Whale was amazing. It went the same way as the Red Banger, actually. Okay. We sold them. We sold them both. The transit van wallowed and finally it was, I'm not sure it was even running. Anyway, we sold that to a guy who was an older guy who was looking for a project with a very nervous-looking wife who just, I've always wanted one, darling.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe our luck. So we sold the White Whale to him. But the Red Banger got to a point where it really was a paddock bomb.
Right.
The door handles, you couldn't wind down the window and you couldn't open the driver's door. You had to actually get in the other. You had to open the back door and reach round and then open the driver's door to get in. Yeah. Starter motor didn't work, so you had to jump start it. It hadn't got any prettier on the externals. Anyway, we advertised it, just thought, well, if we sell it for anything, it would be worth it because we were a bit broke at the time. This guy turned up who was kind of a bit twitchy, and he was just like, yeah, I'll buy it. And we went, really? And he went, well, do you want us to start up? Yeah, you start up if you like, but I'm going to just give us it. I'll just get it started and I'll buy it now.
Yeah.
And we were asking a certain amount of money, and he said, oh, just, here, I'll just give you cash. And we said, oh, well, it's $20 too much. We haven't got any change. Do you want us to? Don't worry about it. Just take more. Just start it up.
Yeah, right.
So we started this thing up. It wasn't registered. It didn't have plates. Yeah. And he said, oh, I'll just take it now. And we went, you sure you don't want to bring a mate round, get a tow it maybe? Because also the starter mode doesn't work. And he's just like, no, I'll just take it now. And in the end, he gave us the money. We jump started it. He got in the car and he drove off. And Steve said, quick, close all the doors, close all the windows, let's go out. We just because it's like maybe he's like he's got to get the getaway car or something. It was obviously so. So
I thought at least he didn't steal it this time like the other one.
Oh, it might have been. Well, that time that the red banger got stolen, Steve went down to the local cop shop to report it stolen. And on his way there, he spotted it. Oh, so he went home and got the spare keys and stole it back.
Less paperwork that way. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so the lightning round, we're going to play a game of Would You Rather.
Yes. They were tough.
See, this is what I thought. Oh, maybe you've pre-briefed and thought about the answers. It's supposed to be...
No. I completely missed the darling bus on this one.
Okay, wonderful. That's good. This is good news. So I'm going to ask you 5 Would You Rather questions.
Yeah.
All the topic of touring.
Yeah.
So here's the scenario. You're on tour.
Yeah.
You're on a highway in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Would you rather
be
a driver or passenger?
It depends. That's very weighted on, because there was a time where with the Mojos I would rather be the driver. Mm-hmm. These days, by default, I'm usually the passenger because Steve usually drives.
Yeah.
So it has to do with your level of trust of the person who is driving.
I see. Okay.
Then you're happy to be a passenger, and then you can kick back.
Okay.
You can have a little snooze.
Otherwise, might be revealing a lot about your previous bandmates there.
Yeah, they know who they are.
Would you rather run out of fuel or get 3 flat tires?
Run out of fuel, because I haven't got the strength anymore to change tires.
No less 3 of them.
No less 3 of them. But it would be really helpful if you weren't that far away from a town and and your phone had reception. The last time I had a car, I was driving Steve's Pajero, and I was on the high country somewhere out the back of between Canberra and Cannes River when I got a flat tyre.
Yeah.
In a howling gale with no phone reception, and thank goodness for that couple that happened to come by with a caravan and rescued me and changed the tyre.
Yeah. Would you rather pay $4 per litre for fuel or have to fill up every 100 kilometres?
I'll just pay it, not have to stop. Would I really? No. Fill up every 100. Oh, that's so penny pinching, but yes. We're looking at the petrol app. We have Petrol Spy. We check for fuel. Well, it's a moot point because it wouldn't happen. We'd find somewhere cheaper.
Yeah. Within 100 kilometres?
No, we'd probably just stop. Stop, but make sure that when you stop, if you're going to go to the toilet or get a coffee, do it while I'm filling up.
Yes.
Don't make me wait.
Would you rather have no windows, the windows are all smashed out, or no heating and air conditioning?
No heating and air conditioning.
And finally, would you rather have the stereo stuck on a foreign language community radio station or an early mix of your first album?
Oh, I think it's always culturally interesting to learn other languages and... Well, I don't know. See, I'm actually considering right now re-releasing my very first solo album as a 20-year anniversary. I'd probably be okay with that. I think I'm proud of that album. Yeah.
On repeat, forever.
No, you're right. You'd have to go to the community radio. You could listen to it once, but you're right.
Yeah.
Anything on repeat on tour gets old.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, Fiona Boyes, thank you so much for dropping in and having a chat with me about your tour buses. It's been enlightening and an absolute pleasure. And thank you everyone for listening to Doris, Your Darling Bus. We'll see you on the next one. Hey friends, it's me again. Don't forget to check out the Doris You Darling Bus Facebook and Instagram pages. There's plenty more content on there. And while you're there, if you've got your own tour bus or tour van or a great story that you'd like to share with everyone, send me a message and I'll share it with the world. Thanks for listening.